in the end of last week, we reached the de-Stalinization period of the Soviet Union under Khrushchev. We looked at the threats he faced in Eastern Europe, and we looked a bit at the Eisenhower and the initial years of the Kennedy administration. So there were things going on in Eastern Europe, the Berlin blockade, the Second Berlin Crisis as it was called, which led to the construction of what? Building. What was built in Berlin as a result of the Second Berlin Crisis? It's very iconic. Yes, the Berlin Wall. There you go. Sometimes the answer is as simple as it sounds. The Berlin Wall, yeah. Okay, so things happened in South America, the coup against the democratic government of Guatemala, supported by the CIA and the Eisenhower administration, and things are happening in the Middle East. Now, in the early part of the Cold War in the Middle East, you had the first Arab-Israeli war. Israel won the war and became an independent state and occupied Palestinian territories, and it had a very big impact on the political character of the new Arab states. It led to the rise of nationalist and socialist movements that essentially attacked the old Arab liberal elites that had ruled these states during their mandate periods. And this leads to regime changes supported by the Soviet Union in Syria, Iraq, and Egypt. And all of the new regimes are fanatically anti-Israeli. Now, those regime changes almost had an effect in Iran, where there was the rise of a socialist opposition to the old regime, and this opposition became coalesced along a liberal prime minister, Mossadegh. And what Mossadegh did is he tried to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian petroleum company. And what happened is the United Kingdom, with some help by incompetent people in the CIA, and really the Americans were really incompetent in this, overthrew Mossadegh. This anti-Mossadegh coup plays a role in Iranian anti-Americanism and later on the Iranian Revolution, so keep it in your mind. Now, what happens in Egypt? 1956, Nasser, who is one of the leaders of the 1952 coup in Egypt, which essentially ended the Khedive dynasty. If you guys remember Mehmet Ali Kavala Mehmet Ali, who ruled Egypt during the 1830s, crashed the Greek Revolution with his son Ibrahim Pasha, and invaded twice the Ottoman Empire. So his family was ruling Egypt until now, as under the protectorship of the British. And it was in 1952 that the last member of that dynasty was overthrown, King Farouk, known for his smoking cigars. So Nasser, who was a military officer, decided to nationalize the Suez Canal. And he also decided to pursue economic nationalization policies, which led to the expulsion of Greeks and Levantines from Egypt. Now, the problem is the Suez Canal is extremely important for global trade. A huge part of the trade from Asia towards Europe passes through the Suez Canal. And secondly, it used to be controlled by the UK and France, who actually had a lot of money invested in it. So what happens is, when Nasser does that, he leads the French and the British to launch a military intervention in cooperation with Israel against Nasser. Now, what's their goal? Their goal is not to overthrow necessarily Nasser, but to force him to retreat. Their more deeper goal is to show that they're still relevant. The early period of the Cold War is a very traumatic period for the European great powers, as they finally come to the reality that they have become less relevant in the world. The Soviet Union and the United States of America are the name of the game. Their empires are being broken throughout the world. They don't feel anymore as major powers, so they decide to use the Suez Crisis as an opportunity to show to the Americans and the Soviets that the British Lion and the French Coke are still strong, and they can show everybody that they're strong. Now, Israel joined because it wanted strategic depth at Sinai. It wanted to take the Sinai Peninsula, so as a result, if it's attacked again by the Arab states, which all of them were promising, it will have more territory to sacrifice in case of defeat before reaching Israel proper. Anyway, they attack Egypt, they're very successful, but guess what happens? The Soviet Union and the United States are not happy about this. The Soviet Union essentially threatens war. It tells England and France that if they don't stop the operations, they will be attacked. Now, the UK and France go to America and say, will you protect us? And America says, no, not over a colonial adventure. So they're forced to back down. And here are the two lessons they learned from the Suez Crisis. The British learned this lesson. Never, ever again challenge the United States of America. Britain must always follow a foreign policy that is in agreement with American interests. Okay? The so-called special relationship. France comes to a different conclusion, which is essentially, we need to get our own nuclear weapons. So next time the Russians tell us, back down, we'll beat you up, we can tell them, we'll burn Moscow, little bear. So they go and they develop their own nuclear deterrent, which they succeed by 1960. So by 1960 you have 3 nuclear powers in the world, plus the British who are gifted some nuclear weapons by the Americans. The Soviets gain immense influence in Egypt, which leads the United States of America to start supporting more and more exclusively Israel. Until this conflict, both the Soviets and the Americans are playing everybody in the Middle East. So, you know, Nasser, despite the fact that he's a nationalist and a socialist, he is someone the Americans try to work with. This also happens with Israel. Israel back then was, technically speaking, a semi-communist country. Most of the economy was nationalized and controlled by kibbutz, which were essentially agricultural communes. So it wasn't as clear as it's today, okay, the Americans were with the Israelis, the Russians were with the Arabs. Not back then. But after the Suez Crisis, this becomes more and more strongly the case. Now, 1967, Nasser feels strong enough to attempt a new war against Israel. There's many reasons for that. First of all, there's the reasons of pan-Arabism. Nasser is not just an Arab nationalist in the sense Egypt. He's an Arab nationalist in the sense pan-Arabist. He wants to unify the Arabic world into one socialist state, okay? And he tries to do a unification with Syria, where there are also Arab nationalists in power. It doesn't work out. So he decides to essentially use a war with Israel to promote Egypt as the natural leader of the Arab people. Okay? The Israelis get wind of this, they see the preparations, and they launch one of the few preemptive wars which the United Nations has actually declared legal. The so-called 6-7 days war. Okay? And they pretty much smash the Arabs, okay? They destroy the Egyptian Air Force on the ground, they destroy the Syrian Air Force on the ground, they blunt the Arabian states, okay? It's a decisive defeat. As a result, most of Palestine, that what we call today the West Bank, which used to be under Jordanian rule until the 7 Days War, is now incorporated in Israel. So until 1967, what had happened in the end of the first Arab-Israeli war is that the West Bank had been incorporated in Jordan. It was part of the Transjordan Kingdom. Okay? Now the Israelis take it. They also take the rest of the Sinai, and then the Golan Heights, which are very important because they are the highest point in the north and they protect Israel from Syria. In this war, you have a clear differentiation between the US and the Soviet Union. The US supports Israel heavily, and the Soviets heavily support the Arab states. So the defeat of the Arabs is seen as an ideological loss for the Soviets. Now, let's move to other parts of the world. Let us go to French Indochina. Let us go to Thailand, Vietnam, Siam. Now, in the early Cold War, we talked about the war between the Viet Minh under Ho Chi Minh and the French, okay, which completed with the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. Okay, now Ho Chi Minh is a very old player. He's been active in Vietnamese independence since before World War I. He actually went to the Versailles Council in 1918 to try to preach and ask for independence for Vietnam, but he was prohibited from participating by the French, who of course said no. Okay? Now, in World War II, he cooperated with the Japanese against the French and built a national liberation struggle, which from 1945 is now supported by the Soviet Union and China. Now, initially, as we said, the Americans are willing to support anti-colonial struggles because they want to see the European powers weaken. But with the onset of the Cold War, they actually decide, in this case, to support the French. The war ends in 1954 with a Vietnamese victory. Okay? So, a happy story, right? Independent Vietnam, well, no, the Americans will not let a happy story. Essentially what they do is they take advantage of regional differentiations to create two Vietnamese states. Now technically both of them are supposed to unite at some point, like South Korea and North Korea, but de facto they become two different states. So with the French they create Southern Vietnam, which is essentially dominated by collaborationist Catholic elites. The French tried to make the Vietnamese into Catholics. It didn't work very well, but there was a powerful Catholic community. While North Vietnam is under Ho Chi Minh, who is increasingly becoming more communist in the way he talks. And the reality of the matter is he was never a communist. He was a nationalist. But since socialism and communism seemed to be the way to build a nation in the Cold War, okay, fine, I'm a communist, okay? Now, Ho Chi Minh does not attack South Vietnam. Instead, he supports an insurgency within South Vietnam, the so-called Viet Cong. So Viet Minh is the united Vietnamese resistance to the French. Viet Cong is the insurgency within South Vietnam. At the same time that Vietnam becomes independent, Cambodia and Laos also become independent, but they're also dominated by the old colonial elites. And North Vietnam, Soviet Union and China also support insurgencies in those as well. So essentially all of Southeast Asia becomes a massive war zone, a proxy war zone for the Cold War. Now, under the Eisenhower administration, and increasingly much more under the Kennedy administration, the United States becomes more involved in the insurgency. The problem is very simple. The governments set up to stop the communists are incompetent. They suck. Fundamentally, they refuse to do the most important type of social reform that stops communism, which is land reform. They refuse to break up the big land holdings and give the land to the poor peasants. Wherever you have land reform, you create millions of small capitalists. They might be poor like hell, but they are not going to become easily communist because communism entails losing their land. Okay? But, you know, in South Vietnam, the government is very corrupt. So these governments cannot defend themselves. Okay, why not just let them fail then? Let them fall. Remember, George Kennan, writing as Citizen X wrote at the start of the Cold War his long telegram. Anybody remember it? Okay? And in the long telegram, he said very clearly that the US will win the Cold War because the Soviet system has such internal political and economic contradictions that it will collapse by itself. I'm not, we talked about the telegram in class, but I know you guys get it out. But Kennan correctly predicted the end of the Cold War in 1946. So the Americans know that communism is doomed in a way. Or at least they have the ideology to say, yeah, okay, so what if Ho Chi Minh takes over and communists take over all these places? Within 20 years, they'll all be capitalists because of the internal contradictions of the communist system. Essentially, Kennan says America needs to defend Europe, Western Europe, England essentially, maybe France, Japan, and the rest of the world can be communist for all they care. Well, Kennan's theory is not the one that's dominant in the thinking of American decision makers. Instead, we got domino theory. It's called from the dominoes, you know, the game, the dominoes. You know, you put the dominoes like this, and you hit the first one and they go and everything. It's pretty cool, you know. They're afraid that if communism wins in Vietnam, the next country to fall will be Thailand. And they're afraid that if Thailand falls, the next country to fall will be Japan. So being unwilling to essentially bet on the strength of the social and political institutions of post-war Japan, terrified of every kind of progressive movement. You know, if you're demanding a bit more of a welfare state for poor peasants, if you're demanding, you know, public education, you're a communist trying to overthrow the free world and create Stalinism everywhere. Okay? They are completely blinded by their terror. They decide that they have to keep South Vietnam's corrupt government in place. As a result, Kennedy starts feeding more and more troops as American advisors into the counterinsurgency warfare. Now, Kennedy has a very personal reason to also do this. Remember, he's the first Catholic to become president of the United States of America. America was a deeply anti-Catholic country for a very long while. Actually, public education in America was created as a way to destroy the Catholic community. Because the idea is if kids could go to cheap public schools, they wouldn't go to Catholic parish schools, so they would all become good Protestants in the end. So he feels he has to prove something. And he remembers that when China fell, when a similarly corrupt regime fell in 1949 with Chiang Kai-shek, the Democrats, and he's a Democrat, were attacked as communists. So he's scared that if he lets Vietnam fall, of course, Vietnam is not China in any way. Don't tell the Vietnamese that. They'll get really pissed off. They hate the Chinese. Okay? But he doesn't care. He doesn't want to be attacked like Truman was attacked. So, that's going on in Southeast Asia. Now, in Latin America, something really interesting happens. Okay? We talked about the coup d'etat in Guatemala against the democratic government by the Americans. And in many places in Latin America, there are progressive demands for change, okay? Not all of them communist, but a lot of times they are cooperating with the communists because they want progressive things. And this leads the Americans, in their blindness and anti-communism, to essentially undermine democracy in many Latin American states. Now, in Cuba, since 1952, the country has been ruled by Batista, who was a general who overthrew another general, who overthrew another general, who overthrew another general, pretty much. So he is a long list of Cuban governments that since 1909 has essentially permitted Cuba to be a protectorate of the United States of America, okay? Especially financial interests. In 1953, there is a revolution headed by Fidel Castro, who back then is not a communist. Fidel Castro was actually a progressive. He was open to the idea of cooperating with America. He was not necessarily seeking communist rule. But he was working with Ernesto Che Guevara, who was a communist, who had been radicalized by witnessing the Guatemala coup. Anyway, there's a civil war from 53 to 59, and it ends with the victory of the Cuban revolutionaries. Now, like every revolution, when they take power, they start purging the old regime, and as in many cases, the purges start becoming very broad, capturing innocent people as well as non-innocents. As a result, many of the people from Cuba emigrate to the US to escape. And those anti-Castro forces begin a military conflict of their own. They try to essentially create counterinsurgency, an insurgency warfare in Cuba. Now, initially, as I said, the US is ambivalent towards Castro because he's not communist. But he makes some decisions that turn the Americans against him. Most importantly, he nationalizes the economy, which essentially antagonizes the powerful US financial interest. Also, he clashes with US criminal organization. The American mob, the mafia, they were very active in Cuba in the 1950s. So the nationalization of the economy, the creation of a system that is less tolerant of the corruption of the old regime is very bad for them. And again, he's still willing to work with the US. So, why did it work out? 4 reasons why the US and Castro couldn't find common ground. First of all, the US saw Castro as too communist, too pro-communist, because of his association with Che Guevara. The Americans really hated Che Guevara. He was the red flag. Secondly, there were simply too many domestic actors within America that were essentially committed to a collapse of any possibility of cooperation between Castro and the US, of any peaceful coexistence. The Cuban exiles, the Cuban community in the US, businesses, the mafia. Finally, third, there were a lot of pro-American authoritarians around who felt that if America forgives Castro for overthrowing one of their sons of bitches, as Lyndon Johnson called them, so he's a president, he gets to use that language, so I just copied him. I'm not swearing, I'm simply giving you the exact term, okay? Most importantly of all, this one, Rafael Trujillo, one of the most disgusting people to ever come to power anywhere in the world, in the Dominican Republic, they were pushing the Americans to take a hard line because they knew that if America finds a modus vivendi with a progressive democratic government in Cuba, well, their little dictatorships are going to follow suit. Okay? And finally, economic clashes. A fundamental level, the Americans hated nationalization, and Castro was doing it. So this leads to a rupture, and the rupture comes in the Kennedy administration because Kennedy, having this need to show that he is not a pushover, that he is a patriot, that he is not going to lose China, okay, he takes a very hardcore reaction. And in the context of the Berlin crisis, he essentially organizes with the CIA an attempt to invade Cuba by paramilitaries, Cuban exiles, the so-called Bay of Pigs War. Okay, the Bay of Pigs invasion. Okay, this is a failure. If you want to read about complete incompetence, read about the Bay of Pigs. The Cubans know that they're coming, they crush the exiles, okay? And, okay, so what? That's life. When you're a great power, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Being a great power means that you can afford to lose, okay? Small states die when they lose. Great powers, they're like, okay, third round. Unfortunately, Kennedy kind of took everything very personal. He didn't see the defeat of Bay of Pigs as part of great power politics. Sometimes you get things and sometimes you don't. He saw it as the Castro is trying to overthrow me, John F. Kennedy, and my brother Robert Kennedy, who was a person who actually organized the Bay of Pigs, okay? So they saw this is personal, man. So you got a bunch of very angry Irish people, and you got a bunch of very angry Hispanic people on the other side. Yeah, it gets very personal, okay? That was very racist, I apologize. Okay? So what the Kennedys do is they go and they use connections with the Italian mafia. Yeah, the United States President and the Attorney General of the United States of America make agreements with organized crime and the CIA to try to kill Castro. They try to assassinate Castro, coming up with so inventive ways as trying to poison his cigars. Cuba is a major cigar exporter in the world. They make the best cigars in the world, it's very true. So they would try to poison his cigars with syringe, so if he will die. They try to shoot him, they try to poison his food, they try to make cigars that blow up, everything. It didn't work out, okay? But Castro was like, what the hell? Okay, so he started getting worried. He started getting seriously worried. So he decided, you know what? If this continues, I'm probably gonna die. My country's gonna be invaded by the mob. Okay, we're not even talking about counter-revolutionary forces anymore. We're talking literally about the mafia. It's gonna make the Batista regime look like a fun part. So, who's the only one who can protect him? Soviet Union, the Khrushchev. Which leads us to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Khrushchev embraces Cuba. The Soviets love Cuba. Why? First of all, it's very good for them to stick it up America. Okay? Until now, the Soviets have been playing defensively because essentially everywhere the Americans are encircling them in Eurasia. This is their chance to actually get a proxy right in front of the front door of the United States of America and make them see how cool it is to have nuclear, to have like a proxy right next to your door. Okay? Secondly, you know, Khrushchev, Malenkov, Molotov, all of these old communists, they have become cynical with trying to survive Stalin, okay? They had murdered, they had killed, they had betrayed each other, they had lost some of that romanticism of the early years of the revolution. And a lot of them were alive when the revolution happened, okay? And the cool thing with Cuba was, it was the first time there was a revolution somewhere without the direct support of the Red Army. It was a true popular revolution. It was communism and it's supposed to happen. The people taking over the power, organizing an army, defeating the imperialists and bringing forth a socialist system. They loved it. This was great for them. They lived through it their younger days, so they were very happy. So they want to protect it also for ideological reasons. So what do? First of all, they increase the military presence of the Soviet Union in Cuba. They create military bases, they move troops, initially advisors, like the Americans have in Vietnam, airplanes and stuff like that, and then they make the crucial choice. They decide to place nuclear weapons on Cuba. Why? One reason is because they wanted to get back to the Americans for placing so many nuclear weapons around Russia. See, the thing is, the Americans could blow up Russia from America. They had the technology, they had the long-range bombers. But even though they had the technology, the Americans were still putting weapons in Turkey. Actually, right behind us, the huge military camp was one of the places where they kept the warheads, the atomic warheads. So here in Czechmekoy, and in the rest of Europe. And the Russians resented this. The Soviets resented this. Secondly, unlike the Americans who could blow the hell out of the Soviet Union with their airplanes, the Soviets couldn't reach America with their weapons, okay? This is something people forget about the early Cold War. In most of the early Cold War, America could burn Moscow, and all that Moscow could do was burn Berlin or Paris, okay? Not exactly the same thing as burning New York. So essentially, Russian deterrence relied on the fact that French people and English people could persuade the Americans to care about them. Okay? bombs put on Cuba, they can reach anywhere in the US. Are you gonna like that, Mr. Kennedy, huh? Now you will live under the fear of nuclear bombs. Yes, done. Okay? That's why they put the nuclear weapons. Well, as we said, the Americans had a technological upper hand throughout the Cold War, especially when it came to airplanes and spying, and, well, they find out that the bombs are on the island, okay? Through U-2 surveillance cameras, okay? And Kennedy just freaks out. Freaks out. This is a massive challenge to an American president. This is unprecedented. Ever since the Monroe Doctrine, no great power, except maybe the French with their little Mexican adventure, ever tried to place military forces in strong numbers that could threaten American security in the Western Hemisphere. Sure, the British had their little empire, but the British had stopped threatening American security. No one had done it. And here you have the Soviet Union in your face to the first Catholic president of the United States of America, who is already considered a loser because of the Bay of Pigs, put nuclear weapons right in front of him. He freaks out. His brother, Robert Kennedy, and the Wish Party and the War Party are calling for war. Curtis Bellamy is like, let's do it. Let's do a nuclear war. Come on. Okay? They're willing to risk even nuclear war, okay? But in the end, as a compromise with the peace party, which is like, okay, let's not burn the world over freaking Cuba. I mean, okay, it's a nice island, the women are hot, there's rum, there's cigars, but it's really not worth burning New York to the ground. Some conservative American politician, are you sure about that? Can we talk about that again? New York, full of Jews, burn it, you know, they're all communists there anyway. No. So the idea was to do a quarantine. Essentially, the Americans declared that any ship going into Cuba had to be checked by the Americans. They didn't call it a blockade. Do you know why? Blockade is an act of war. You cannot do blockades in times of peace. It's a military action. So if the Americans declared a blockade, de facto they will be declaring war to Cuba. They will be violating essentially international law. Now you will tell me, why does America care about international law? Well, because you could sue the United States of American government in American courts and get money out of it. Say, the difference between Soviets and the Americans is the Soviet Union, you can't sue the government. You gotta execute it. In the United States of America, you can sue the government and make money out of it, okay? So they call it a quarantine, because quarantine is what you do when a country has a sickness. It's something you can do in peace. De facto, it's a blockade. So they tell the Soviets, if your ships do not stop to be checked by American ships, well, there's gonna be war. Khrushchev blinks. He does not violate the de facto blockade. At the same time, behind the scenes, partly through Robert Kennedy, there's a start of secret negotiations. The result is this. Now, China and Castro himself are going like, war! Anecdotally, Mao was supposed to have said to Khrushchev, why don't we fight the war? It's going to be a nuclear war, says Khrushchev. Mao says, so what? Combine the Soviet Union and China have a population of, I don't know, 1,500,000, okay? So the bombs go, 70% of us die, 70% of them die. Well, that still means we will have more communists left. Of course, more Chinese communists left, which is what Khrushchev had a problem with, okay? I guess they had not accepted the brotherhood of the communist race, okay? Cuba is going crazy because it's Cuba, and why not, okay? But Khrushchev does not want a nuclear war, and the Soviets do not want a nuclear war, so they make two requests. First of all, the US has to stop trying to overthrow the Cuban government. They're not asking that America has nice relations with the Cuban government. They're not even asking for the end of any blockades, blah, blah. They're just saying, can you stop with the assassinations? and CIA operations and all that stuff. Could you please stop that? Okay? Secondly, can you take your nuclear weapons from Turkey, remove them, your Jupiter missiles, and we'll remove ours from Cuba? It'll be all nice and great. The US agrees. Why? Frankly, because technology. The Americans are ready in 1961 to test the first ICBM missile, that is intercontinental ballistic missile. Those are the bombs that can leave from Kansas and reach into Siberia. Okay? If you have ICBMs, you don't need missiles in Turkey. They're irrelevant. So for the Americans, they say, okay, it's not a big thing. On the other thing, things become complicated. Kennedy overtly agrees to respect Cuban independence. But as we said, both Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy have serious personal issues with Castro. They see it personal, okay? And they create a parallel organization within the state based on the CIA and the Cuban Mafia, which continues trying to assassinate Castro in defiance of official US policy. Let me clarify this so you understand it. The President of the United States of America is now following a personal policy using illegal means that is officially against American policy. Okay? Consequences of the Cuban Missile Crisis. One, the Kennedys are very good on media manipulation, and they present the result as a great American victory. In 1963, Kennedy travels to Europe, goes through a very big tour of Europe, and he solidifies his image as a progressive, democratic, freedom-loving, peace-loving person. My cousin is gonna hate this class because she loves Kennedy so much. Okay? Khrushchev, on the other hand, sucks at media representation. He completely bungles this, fails to actually explain to everybody what a great victory the Soviet Union attained, and as a result, his position is threatened. The Castros and the Kennedys engage in essentially what could be considered a personal vendetta in the shadows. They start trying to kill each other. Literally. At some point the Castros are like, screw this. You're trying to kill us with the CIA and the mob? We can play that game. The Castros themselves tried creating their own clandestine network in the US, seeking to kill the Kennedys. That's why in international politics, my dear students, you never take anything fucking personally. Okay? You just accept, I lost. Okay? Find another way to make it up. Cuba begins to export revolution to Latin America and Africa. Okay? Now, literally, I'm not kidding you, the main weapon of communism in Africa was Cuba. Okay? Cuba was doing the export of communism in Africa. Not the Soviet Union, not China back then. The US blocks its influence in Latin America through diplomatic and economic and military means, and by supporting right-wing authoritarianism, okay? So they try to create an alliance of progress in Latin America, which is kind of like a Marshall Plan in the US, but they're never serious about it. Why? Because they're racists, okay? And they're not willing to do the kind of effort they put into Western Europe and Japan in the Americas. So instead what they do is they support a military coup in Brazil, which the current president of Brazil is in love with because he is a difficult chap, okay? And they invade the Dominican Republic, okay? Because to stop a communist democratic revolution. I mean, he's perfect. Kennedy went to Berlin and said this iconic speech, okay?
There are many people in the world who really don't understand, or say they don't, what is the great issue between the free world and the communist world. Let them come to Berlin. Freedom has many difficulties. And democracy is not perfect. But we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people in, to prevent them from leaving us. All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the word, Ich bin ein Berliner.
Perfect. As I told you, the wall is just the worst media thing the Soviet Union ever did in the Cold War. This guy works with the mob, trying to kill the leader of another country, and yet he can manipulate the images that the Soviets have so easily given him. It just says, I am Berliner. And people go like, ah. And nowadays, Kennedy is remembered as a progressive champion of freedom. Okay? Well, Khrushchev is remembered as the bubbling clown image. Second consequence, which is very important for our world today, the Cuban Missile Crisis leads to the serious investment in the space program. We get to go to the moon and stuff like that, which of course is useful for building very nice ICBM missiles. This is where you get the crazy, huge development of ICBM missiles. Once you build ICBM missiles, the military aspect of the Cold War between America and the Soviet Union freezes. All those regional bases that had to be defended with dictatorships, coups, Soviet coups, American coups, they all become irrelevant. Because now you put your nuclear weapon in your little dacha in the middle of Irkutsk, or you put your nuclear weapons in the middle of nowhere in South Dakota or Kansas, and they can burn any part of the world you want. There's no need for Turkish bases or Greek bases. There's no need for German bases or Polish bases. There's none. Now you have mutual assured destruction for the first time 100%. Until now, the Americans could legitimately destroy the Soviet Union without having to worry about themselves. It would only cost Europe and Japan. So in a way, capitalism saves the world because there's just so much American money invested in Europe and Japan that it's not easy to say, oh yeah, well, let's let it burn, and we'll rebuild afterwards. Now the Americans are equally as threat. Okay? Now the result, Mao, the leader of Red China, always having issues with Khrushchev ever since the Stalinization, because Mao is kind of like a Stalin. You know, the cult of personality takes a very special form. He considers Khrushchev to be weak. Revisionist is the official. You know, if you're a communist, the worst bad word you can say to another communist is to call him a revisionist. Okay? It will lead you to fight each other to the death. Okay? He denounces Khrushchev, and this leads to the end of the bipolar Cold War period, because from now on, Red China, Communist China, starts following its own policy. Okay, I'll talk about the Sino-Soviet split and then we'll take a break. So let's see why this happened. In a way, this was inevitable. In the sense of foreign policy inevitable. Doesn't mean it would have happened. People can always make different choices, but if they're not willing to make different choices, the weight of history will have driven to this. Because first of all, there were ideological reasons. Mao is a hardliner, communist doing his own purges. Khrushchev is, we can win by being nicer, okay? Doesn't work. Secondly, as I said, the difference between the Soviets and the Chinese in the crisis ever since the Korean War is that the Chinese are willing to fight a war with America because they have enough people to kill. They don't have a problem. Even if half of the Chinese population wins, China still has more people than America. They're not scared. They've got no problem to fight for Taiwan or Korea. 3, realpolitik issues. China and Russia have huge territorial disputes in Siberia. These go all the way back to the era of the Chinese Empire and the Russian Empire. They were never resolved. Indeed, the Chinese communists are like, okay, Russian comrades, we are now all communists of the communist race. We are all Soviet men and Soviet women. They didn't get to the gender part yet, okay? We're all brothers, so why don't you give us back the territory you took when our country was a joke? Keep attention to the class, please. Okay? Attention to the class. The first example of the split is 1962. In 1962, India, itself a newly independent state ruled by a socialist nationalist coalition, engages in a territorial war with China over Tibet. The Chinese pretty much crushed the Indians, but the Soviets, instead of allying with China, actually support the Indians. Okay? So what the Chinese decided to do is two things. First of all, we need nuclear weapons. In 1964, they explode their own bomb. Okay? So like the French, they come to the conclusion that if you want to be an independent power in the international system, you have to have an independent nuclear arsenal. You can't be like the Brits begging the Americans for their Trident missiles, okay? Secondly, pursue their own policy in regards to world revolution. Maoism becomes now a new international communist trend in opposition to Leninism, Marxism-Leninism, and Stalinism. Seek their own allies. And they are willing to support enemies of Soviet allies, even if those allies are allies of America. The key state here, Pakistan. Pakistan is an enemy of India. India is an ally of the Soviet Union. Pakistan is an ally of the United States of America. Well, guess what? The Chinese decided in the Indo-Pakistani conflict, their natural alliance is with Pakistan. Here's the interesting thing. Blinded by stupid anti-communism, the Americans don't catch on to this. It's going to take 10 years for them to understand that there isn't anymore a communist world. That China and Russia, the Soviet Union, are following different strategies. This has happened in 1962. They're not able to see it because communism, 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 communism. Any questions? Okay, let's take a 20-minute break. It's 11:49, 11:50 by my clock. Be back here at 12:10. Okay, let's take a step away and look at what's going on in Africa and in the rest of Asia, okay? And what's going on is decolonization. A breaking of European chains, revolution, mass murder, mass death, economic failure, but also hope. Okay, in Africa, the Soviet Union, using Cuba as its proxy, supports the creation of revolutionary communist regimes against Belgium, Portuguese, and French colonial powers. Yes, Belgium and Portugal, you heard that correctly. In the end, it turns out the most fanatical imperialist powers, the ones that had the least willingness to give up their empires, were the tiny European states. Britain was like, okay, it was nice ruling the world, bloody hell now, we're gonna do Brexit, okay? France is still fanatical because it's France, but after that, it's literally the small European states, Belgium, Portugal, and the Netherlands, who are fanatically clinging into their empires. The United States reacts to Soviet encroachment in Africa and Asia by supporting the colonial powers themselves or supporting anti-communist colonial elites. By the way, when you study African politics and Asian politics in the era, everybody's a socialist! I'm not kidding. Every side in this conflict calls themselves socialists. In Angola, you have socialist warrior front fighting a Marxist-Leninist socialist warrior front. Because everybody, see, the dominance of socialist ideas is so powerful, but see, it is impossible to mobilize populations without presenting yourself like that. Even if in reality you're just another thug. Now, in Asia, the big conflicts are the Indo-Pakistani wars. Now, there was a war in 1947 over Kashmir, we talked about it, which was mostly local. In 1965, there's a much more serious war. And the Soviets support India, while for the first time the United States of America and China support Pakistan. And the Americans are still clueless that the communists in China are not the same thing as the communists in the Soviet Union, despite the fact that they're both supporting Pakistani military regimes. And by the way, the Indians win the second war as well. Let's look at a bit of those wars. Here's a list of the decolonization wars in the early Cold War, middle Cold War period. The ones with, all of these are violent conflicts. The ones in asterisk were actually won by the colonial power, but were followed by negotiations that led to independence. So, against the UK, Cyprus, EOKA Alpha, the first EOKA, which also leads to the first intercommunal clashes. Okay, the Greek Cypriots rebel against the United Kingdom. They use terrorism, they use guerrilla warfare, they lose. The British are able to impose militarily themselves on the island, but they decide to essentially negotiate an independence. The Jews in Palestine, many people don't know this, they also launched a military conflict against Great Britain. Also a terrorist campaign. The King David Hotel explosion is one of the biggest ever. It almost killed Churchill. Okay, they blew up literally the most important hotel in Jerusalem, killing a lot of British officers. This one was successful. In Kenya, the Mau Mau, which was a left-leaning progressive, but also a bit tribal-based organization, led to a very nasty counterinsurgency warfare, where the British killed a lot of people, starved a lot of people. Again, they were defeated, the rebels, but the British negotiated independence. France, in Cameroon, the rebellion actually defeats the French. But in Madagascar and Algeria, in both cases, the French military defeats the rebels, but it ends up doing negotiations and having to declare independence. Against Spain, in Morocco, there is the Ifni War. But the most bloody of all of this is against Portugal. The Portugal counterinsurgency warfare is one of the most bloodiest points in human history. The Portuguese were merciless. And the people fighting the Portuguese were merciless because the Portuguese had a lot of mixed race people. Okay, they intermarried. So the conflict really quickly turned into a racial conflict between mixed race people and African people. In Guinea-Bissau, the Portuguese were defeated, they gave independence. But in the War of Independence, but in Mozambique and Angola, the Portuguese won the battles, but were forced to negotiate independence. The Netherlands, they controlled Indonesia, military conflict. Again, the Dutch defeat the Indonesian independence movement, but they have to negotiate independence. In Belgium, you have Congo with a very bloody aftermath. In Rwanda, the Belgians defeat the rebels, but again, they're forced to give independence. Do you see the pattern here? And what do you see? What's going on? Why is decolonization happening? Are the rebels winning? No, in the majority of the cases, the local rebels are defeated. Even the weakest European countries, Portugal and Belgium, are strong enough militarily that they can crush most of the local insurgencies. But as I told you, two great powers have decided the colonial empires are over, the United States and the Soviet Union. That's why you see all those stars up there, all those cases where the colonial power decisively wins the battle and loses the peace. Generally speaking, the British, the French, and the Spanish are willing to negotiate independence as long as their economic interests are protected. The British were extremely good at this, okay? They retained economic control of many of their ex-colonies. In almost all cases of violent struggle, the colonial forces won. This is important because there are a lot of romantic idiots in this world that tell a false narrative of what happened in Africa and Asia in the 1969, 70s. And they tell you, oh, revolutions are easy. You can defeat the powers that be. That's not true. In most of the cases, the revolutions failed. The people were butchered in huge numbers. The European armies were superior, okay? But you don't need to win the war when you can win the peace, which is what happened time and time again. As a result of American and Soviet pressure and the simple reality that the Europeans were dirt poor, okay, and thus dependent on American economic support, they had to give independence, okay? Also, the metropole populations in a lot of these cases did not want to fight for the colonies. This was especially the case in France. In Algeria, the war almost led to a civil war in France. Why? Because French Algerians, which were mostly Jews, Greeks, Latino, okay, they were really committed to keeping Algeria part of France. But French of the mainland, they were like, why should we die for this colonialism? So it almost led to civil war. In most cases, independence leads to even worse fighting, including genocide, ethnic cleansing. Many of the new states prey on each other. Once they get their independence, immediately they try to destroy the independence of the country next door. Okay? Portugal was the most unwilling of the powers to give up its territories, and almost all of the new states claimed that they were socialists. Not because they were actually socialists, but because they hoped to get Soviet money. This is going right now in Africa as well with China. During the 1990s, 2000s, there was an opening of democracy in Africa because everybody wanted to be on the good side of the European Union, the United States of America. Nowadays, because the European Union is busy fighting itself and the United States of America is led by a racist orange-haired person, China has been able to replace them. And a lot of them now become authoritarian, so they can show that China was similar to you. It's not truly that they are ideologically that they want the money. And it's easier to get money if you seem to be on the side of the other side. So let's take a summary look at the Cold War in the mid-1960s. There are some attempts at cooperation between the United States and the Soviet Union, especially after the Berlin crisis, especially of arms control. In 1963, you get the red line telephone link. You know the red line, the red telephone? That's built in 1963 because they got so freaked out by the Cuban Missile Crisis that they decided there should be a direct line of contact between the Politburo and the American president. Before that, there wasn't. You had to go to the embassy, blah, blah, blah. So now they decide, okay, now we have weapons that can destroy humanity in 10 minutes. It shouldn't take more time to talk with each other than it will take for us to kill each other. Okay? In Europe, the system is stable. The Berlin crisis is the last crisis between the Soviet Union and America and Europe until the end of the Cold War, pretty much. Okay? There are issues within each of the spheres of influence, within each of the hegemonies, but not between them. The conflicts outside of Europe, the Vietnam War, the colonization conflicts, are kept limited. The creation of intercontinental ballistic missiles guarantee MAD, and immediately when the Americans and the Soviets get them, they try to make sure that nobody else can get them by creating the nuclear weapon, the partial test ban treaty, okay, which is goal is to make it hard for other states to gain ICBMs. And it largely works. Of course, China gets the bomb, France has already have the bomb, but it doesn't make it very hard for these countries to get ICBMs. China got its first ICBMs in the 1980s. And they're really primitive compared to Americans and Russian ones. France doesn't still have ICBMs. Okay? Generally speaking, the US and Soviet Union have clarified what belongs to them, where can they both play little games with human lives, and where it's not okay to do so. And pretty much this leaves only China as an isolated pariah power. Pretty much China is the only power now that is interested in breaking the world apart, in the sense of destroying this hegemonic condominium. Okay? So it's very stable. The 63-64 is a major pivot in the history of the Cold War. John F. Kennedy is assassinated at Dallas, Texas by the communist Lee Harvey Oswald. Now there are a lot of theories about what happened. Lots of conspiracy theories. There is a movie created by that, I don't remember, Oliver Stone, where he presents his story. My own view, after my readings, is that Castro did it. And Castro did it because the freaking Kennedys had not stopped trying to kill him since 1961. So at some point he decided, screw this, okay? There are some indications that Oswald, who actually was married to a Soviet woman and had been kicked out of the Soviet Union, wanted to return back to the Soviet Union, and he was trying to work through the Cuban embassy to get permission to return because the Soviets actually considered him insane. Anyway, we might never know, or we'll know in 50 years when they decharacterize the things. My opinion, Castro did it with assistance from the American mob that also got tired of Kennedy. And probably the government was fine with it happening because, I remind you, the President of the United States of America had created a parallel state structure using the mob and the CIA to try and kill the leader of another country which America had promised to leave alone and over which almost a nuclear war happened. No one was happy with Kennedy. Okay? He's replaced by President Lyndon Johnson. Johnson is a veteran politician. Probably, without exaggeration, the best American congressperson in the history of the United States of America. A man that knew how to play the Senate and the House of Representatives, okay? So, unlike Kennedy, he's a veteran, hard-nosed, cynical SOB, okay? At the same time, 64, Khrushchev finally pays the price for his failures in Cuba. He is overthrown by an internal coup by the Politburo and replaced by Leonid Brezhnev. Important thing too, for the first time in the history of the Soviet Union, the overthrow is not followed by executions. Khrushchev is not executed. He's given a nice retirement home, doctor, and he's permitted to live the rest of his days over there in semi-exile where he writes his books. There are purges, but the purges do not lead to executions. Most of the time they lead you, oh, you used to work for the Central Committee of the Politburo in Moscow. Your new job is factory inspector number 550,000 in Omsk, Siberia. Okay? Khrushchev is proud of that. He actually characteristically says, they didn't kill me. See, that's my success. He's replaced by Brezhnev, who, like Khrushchev, is an old hand in the Soviet system, but unlike Khrushchev, was never a clown. Brezhnev is a very serious person and very conservative. Now, let's talk about Johnson's policy. Johnson, as an American senator, never really cared about foreign policy. His game was domestic politics, okay? He was a New Deal Democrat. He cared about reforming the American economic and political system and essentially defeating poverty, okay? Within America, he supported the civil rights movement led by people like, Martin Luther King and others, Rosa Parks, which destroyed Jim Crow. And he began a major welfare state reform called the Great Society. These were his political children. This is what excited him. He loved this stuff. he didn't like foreign policy. So he had to retain the Kennedy team, okay, and largely follow the Kennedy line in foreign policy, okay, because he didn't know much about it. The problem was that the Kennedy line, even though Kennedy himself was trying to slowly get the hell out of Vietnam, the main line still was commitment to Vietnam as an independent state. And as a result, trying to balance the internal opposition to these major projects, these are huge projects by American standards, by any global standards, he intensifies the war in Vietnam as a way to protect himself from the Republicans who attack him as a pacifist. So 1965 to 1973, we enter into the high period of the Vietnam War. What about Brezhnev? Domestically, Brezhnev agrees with Khrushchev on one thing. One person should not have absolute power in the Soviet Union. But he feels that Khrushchev himself had too much power. Okay, that yes, we didn't talk about the kind of power Stalin had, but Khrushchev also had amassed a lot of personal power. So his goal was to weaken the rule of the General Secretary of the Communist Party and strengthen collective leadership within the Politburo. At the same time, he reverses a lot of the liberalizations of Khrushchev, believing that liberalization will weaken the system. And his main goal is stability. Brezhnev is an archetypical conservative. He doesn't actually have an ideology. He is a communist in the sense that he wants to maintain the Soviet Union, but he's not really a communist in the sense of he tries to reach the next level of socialist revolutionary transformation. He's conservative. He wants peace, stability. In foreign policy, he pursues a de-escalation of relations with the US because he doesn't care so much anymore about the ideological component, while at the same time increasing tensions with Mao, because Mao is an ideological enemy. Brezhnev believes he can control the domestic situation in the Soviet Union against American imperialism. Mao is different. Mao creates Maoists. Maoists challenge ideologically the power of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, or the CPCU. So he's a big threat. Also, Mao is a direct territorial threat to the Soviet Union. He wants Soviet territory. At the same time, the Soviet Union keeps on producing excellent propaganda. Last week I showed you American propaganda. This week it's time for you to watch a Soviet propaganda cartoon. So lean back and watch this cartoon and then tell me which one of the two do you think was a better means of propaganda.
родных, а также по закону наследников иных. Имела та старуха солидный капитал. Когда же день наследства, советный час настал, наследники узнали к позору своему, что все, увы, досталось бульдогу одному. Не могут адвокаты за это отвечать. Закон на завещании есть подпись и печать. Покойница второго заставила его, а она отказалась любиться своего. Зачем собаке деньги? Ходить в универмаг. Бывают разве деньги у кошек и собак? Но стал миллионером осиротевший пес, и стал еще курносей его курносый нос. Квартира в самом центре, на 5-й авеню. Шеф-повар составляет на каждый день меню. На завтрак отбивные, бифштексы на обед, на ужин фрикадельки, сардины и паштет. Он ездит на город, здоровый бережет. По средам парикмахер под бокс его стрижет. Есть у бульдога вилла и новый кадиллак, и сшитый у портного собачий черный фрак. Согласно завещанию, живет при нем слуга. Он ездит с ним на скачки, на гонки, на бега. Огни реклам над городом пылают, как пожар. Пес едет развлекаться в ночной шикарный бар. врачом уже не узнает. Он в клуб миллионеров записан как вампир. У них он научился рычать при слове «мир». Печатают газеты с бульдогом интервью. Бульдогник излагает позицию свою, собачью точку зрения на космос, на прогресс. Вот уже он избран на выборах каждый день.
Okay, so that's that. So, interesting way of doing propaganda. So which one did you like the most? Those of you who like the American propaganda from last week more, raise your hand. Okay, those who like the Soviet propaganda from this week, raise your hand. Okay, yes, the Soviets were a bit better at doing the whole innuendo thing. Okay, let's talk a bit Europe in the mid 1960s, early 1970s, okay? As we said, there was stability. Both powers act to manage their sphere. Now, in 1968, with about 4 years after the fall of Khrushchev, there is a crisis in Czechoslovakia. Just like in Hungary in 1954, there is an attempt to liberalize the regime from within. Okay, so this is not an anti-communist revolution. These are communists trying to create a more liberal version of communism. Just like in the case of Hungary, Brezhnev and the rest of the Soviet bloc opposes liberalization and intervene militarily. But unlike Hungary, there's no war. The Czechoslovakian communists, understanding that the game is over, meekly submit and accept the decision of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. So there's no massive executions, there's no massive death. There's retirements, imprisonments, and sending you off to Omsk as factory inspector number 455. This leads to the Brezhnev doctrine, where Brezhnev says that the Soviet Union will intervene in Eastern Europe against any reforms it considers dangerous. Okay? The United States faces its own crisis in Greece, and in a minute you will tell us the story, where essentially in Greece, the strengthening of the left-wing parties under Ennomenes Dinamis Aristeras, EDA, United Left Forces, and a possible coalition with the Union of the Center under George Papandreou, the great father of the current Papandreou, led to a coup supported by the king, by colonels who did then their own coup, which the palace and the US later blessed, the so-called colonels junta. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Okay, so first of all, the game was about 38 pages, so I could...
Welcome to the university.
I tried to summarize the best that I could.
That's okay. I want you to summarize it. I don't want you to read the whole thing. That would be very boring.
United States and the Great Copiat of 1967 were the eagle and the phoenix birds over feathers. On April 21st, 1967, a military junta of Greek army colonel staged a successful coup d'etat that suppressed the rule of law and democracy for 7 years. Internationally, the junta launched a military overthrow of the democratically elected president of Cyprus, which triggered the Greco-Turkish war that has left the island with the nation divided and heavily militarized 30 years later. All along, one of the strongest conspiracy theories in Greece has been that the United States sponsored the 1967 coup. Central Union Party leader George Papandreou came to power in 1964. Had conflicts with the king for leaking documents of Pericles' plan from the previous regime. King retaliated with leaking to the press about an alleged plot to eliminate the monarchy and establishing a left-wing government. This plot was to be carried out by a paramilitary group known as Aspida, allegedly under the leadership of Andreas Papandreou, George Papandreou's son. Later he refused many times. After he refused many times, George Papandreou, who felt that the Prime Minister should be able to at least select his own cabinet, resigned on July 15, 1965. Feeling that he had been maneuvered out of the politics by the king, Papandreou countered by launching a second unyielding struggle. Elections were ultimately scheduled for May 28, 1967. By mid-March 1967, many Greeks, including the king himself, became convinced that Papandreou would win the May elections. A pre-election CIA poll predicted that George Papandreou's margin of victory would be greater in the upcoming election than it was in 1964, when his party secured 53% of the vote. In order to prevent George Papandreou's return to power, the king planned an extra parliamentary solution, that is a coup, to be staged by generals loyal to the palace. However, to the surprise of many, a group of army colonels staged the coup d'etat of their own on April 21, 1967, circumventing the scheduled May elections and the victory of George Papandreou. Old man was now Senator, and if he were elected, Andreas would become more influential than ever. US was increasingly concerned about the election. They were concerned that if Papandreou won, Andreas would be in the driver's seat for all practical purposes. He would withdraw Greece from NATO, evacuate the United States bases, shut down communication center at Neamatri. Andreas was also charging that the Americans corrupted the Greek economy. His answer would be to restrict the American presence and demand a high price for what remains. There are three factors that are frequently highlighted to suggest American responsibility for the colonial coup. One, the US Embassy in Athens favored a covert operation to prevent Papandreou from coming to power. Two, the junta that staged the coup had connections to the American intelligence community. And three, the US military and intelligence presence in the Greece did not resist the coup, which was likely executed beyond that plan on the morning. However, there are still not enough proof that the US was involved in the coup. There may be later on if CIA were to declassify their files about the subject, but looking at the actions of US Embassy and Johnson administrations, it seems certain that the US never wanted the coup to happen and tried to prevent it since it would remove democracy. That was United States goal to spread during the Cold War period. Before it happened, Ambassador Talbot was still optimistic that a coup would not likely to be happening. In their view, a plan probably didn't exist for certain actions by military in an event of dictatorship. On the contrary, they hold the opinion that military would not seek independently to impose a dictatorship, but it would support a dictatorship if king decided in favor of such regime. Later, which they tried, but the king refused to favor them. Optimism then turned into pessimism. King said he could not afford Andreas coming to power, and Talbot that commended what we don't need in NATO now is a great military dictatorship in a broadcast. Americans, reported by others, were caught in genuine surprise on the day of the coup and were not expecting it to happen at all. US halted its support to Greece since the coup was done. With US produced tanks and it could not help Greece become more undemocratic by supporting it with weaponry. They were strictly called to the junta regime and made sure the arrival of Sixth Fleet Task Force Group in Greek waters has not gone unnoticed by top people. To conclude, there are still less information about the US involvement in the 67 coup. Only opening of the CIA archives can enlighten it, so we don't have much else than to wait. However, a recent study by Thomas Schwartz documents that Johnson was driven by liberal democratic principles in Europe aimed at promoting detente and preserving international security. Thus, according to Schwartz, Johnson considered revolutionary violence, arguably like the colonel's revolutionary plots, as unacceptable. Arguably, the Nixon administration, which was far more supportive of the Papandreou's government than the Johnson administration, deserve some blame for these consequences. But to answer, if the two countries were birds of a feather, given the new evidence revealed above, there is a strong, albeit not foolproof, case to be made that, to the extent that the two regimes were a bird of a feather, but they did not take life together until after April 21st, 1967.
Yeah. The reason it talks about birds of a feather, the symbol of the Greek junta was the phoenix rising from the fire.
Yes, that's the bald eagle.
Yeah. Now we know a bit more, and what we know is that the CIA was heavily cooperating with the palace for the general's coup, but they were completely surprised by the colonel's coup. But the colonel's coup did have connections within the CIA the official CIA didn't know about. So it's kind of inception. There are factions. Within the CIA there were factions, and one of the factions was very close to the colonels. By the way, the colonels were fascists. The CIA openly said these people are real fascists. They're not like semi-authoritarian or liberal authoritarian. No, they are real fascists. Funnily enough, it turned out against the king. The king accepted the coup because he was afraid that Papandreou would one day lead to a republic. Well, the king was actually kicked out of Greece by the coup. He attempted to do a counter coup in 1969, which failed, and the dictatorship declared Greece a republic. Okay? So be careful about what you wish. But there's also a bit of the story of the craziness. George Papandreou had been a prime minister during the destruction of the Greek communist revolution in 1944, the Dekembriana. He was anti-communist, but he was a left-wing liberal. His son was a bit more playing the left-wing socialistic, but even he was not a communist. So it was the classical American overreaction. Now, let's talk about the Vietnam War. So 1969. The increased US military presence is counterbalanced by the increased NVA, North Vietnamese Army presence. By the way, North Vietnam did not call itself North Vietnam, it called itself the Democratic People's Republic of Vietnam. Okay? The US, the South Vietnamese Army phased, plus their allies, which included everybody, South Korea, Philippines, Thailand, Australia, New Zealand, and Taiwan, all sent troops to fight in Vietnam. Okay? Fought against the Viet Cong and the NBA and their allies, which were mostly Cuba and North Korea. The Soviet Union did not play as big a role in the Vietnam War as it did in the Korean War, because it relied mostly in its proxies. China is not present here. You're going to learn later on why, but let's just say it has part to do with the Sino-Soviet split, and also the fact that the Vietnamese and the Chinese hate each other because of history. Now, both sides had serious issues. The US had conflicting strategies. On the one hand, it had a strategy of reinforcing and strengthening the ability of the South Vietnamese government to live without the United States support, to make it an independent country. And the basic one here is the strategic complex policy, where the goal was to essentially relocate the population to areas which will be more well-connected, create new villages. Those villages usually very well supported by the American government with medicine, education, and food, and thus deny the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese rural support. So, Mao used to say that guerrilla warfare is like a fish inside a sea, okay? So the way you defeat the guerrilla warfare is you drain the sea, drain the river, take the people out. On the other hand, though, the Americans were also trying to militarily defeat the Vietnamese, okay, by search and destroy missions. Literally send American troops and Vietnamese, Southern Vietnamese troops into the jungle to find the bases of the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong and destroy them there, okay? The new Turkish tradition of counting how many terrorists were neutralized every week, this started with the Vietnam War, where the Johnson administration tried to track how well America was doing by counting how many Viet Cong were neutralized. The problem was that these policies were contradictory. One required the US to cause destruction, the other one required it to avoid destruction. And secondly, they were both hampered by the South Vietnamese government. Interestingly enough, the first policy was done by the Marine Corps, which was very successful, while the second policy was mainly driven by the Army in the US military. What about the Viet Cong and NVA? They have a serious issue here. On the one hand, you have the army of the country of Vietnam, which is a conventional military force built along Soviet lines, okay? And they are good at fighting conventional warfare. On the other hand, you have a guerrilla insurgency, which is the Viet Cong, who are insurgents. They are guerrillas. They are not good at fighting conventional warfare. So there is a tension between the strategy preferred by the NVA command and the strategy preferred by the local insurgents. From 65 to 68, generally speaking, the Americans crush the North Vietnamese army wherever they meet it, okay? They win massive conventional battles, but they always fail to destroy the NVA. The NVA is always able to avoid eradication. They get their teeth broken, but they're always able to come back up and stand, okay? Indeed, if you look carefully in a good detailed study of the Vietnam War, what you're going to notice is throughout the war, the North Vietnamese were always able to keep in South Vietnam at least 10 conventional divisions, not guerrillas, literally normal divisions right in the middle of the American army. The Viet Cong were greatly weakened by the strategic hamlet policy because they lost their rural population support. Meanwhile, trying to stop the arrival of Vietnamese troops, northern Vietnamese troops, the Americans expand the war to Laos and Cambodia, where they're trying to cut off essentially the support. 1968 is the decisive date. In 1968, you have the Tet Offensive. In the Tet Offensive, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong make a large-scale offensive. Now, it is defeated, okay, on the field. And the Viet Cong as a force are destroyed. Up to 1968, you could talk about the Vietnam War as a semi-guerrilla warfare, where the Americans are fighting a guerrilla force. From 68 and afterwards, that's over. The war becomes fully conventional, as the Viet Cong insurgency is crushed. The problem is this. You're noticing how, as we enter the Cold War, victory on the battlefield is meaningless. It's all about image. Despite the fact that the Americans defeated the Tet Offensive, the very fact that the Tet Offensive happened, and the way that it was recorded and sent to American televisions was a destructive loss for the American government. Because the American public started believing that the war was not going anywhere. In conjunction with these four elements, an ailing economy, race riots that were created from the failure of the US government to live up to the promise of the successful civil rights movement, broken morale in the US after a series of political assassinations. Robert Kennedy is murdered, Martin Luther King is murdered, Malcolm X is murdered. American politics essentially becomes extremely deadly, and the pictures of atrocities from the Vietnam War, Lyndon Johnson decided not to run for president in 1969. He's broken. Despite presiding over the greatest welfare expansion in America, despite presiding over the end of Jim Crow, despite winning on the battlefield, he decides that the image is so terrible that there is no way to recoup it, and he just decides, a veteran politician again, to give up. He is replaced by Richard Nixon, the first Republican to become president ever since Eisenhower, who makes as his national security advisor an academic, Henry Kissinger. This is an iconic image from the Tet Offensive. I'm going to warn you, it's very graphic. In 1968, this is the picture shown in American television sets, where people were eating their dinner with their family.
Exekution auf offener Straße. Mord vor laufender Kamera.
So this is a Very classical picture. What happened is the chief of police of Saigon executed a Viet Cong prisoner of war right on TV. The Viet Cong, by the way, had previously executed a bunch of police officers. So this is not just a story of, oh, I find an innocent people and shoot them. There's hatred here. But the point is, that was not talked about on the television. This is the image they got. The image Americans got is that we are allied with a nasty regime and fighting a war that is going nowhere. Anyway, what's going on between China and the Soviet Union? The split becomes more and more militarized. In India, a Maoist revolt starts. By the way, this Maoist revolt is still going on. It is the biggest insurgency right now in the world. It's called the Nagaland insurgency. It has been going on since the 1960s. It's killed hundreds of thousands, okay? No one tells you about it on TV because it's been going on for so long, it's become ritualized. The Soviet Union supports the Indian socialist government while China supports the Maoist revolt. In '69, you have the first open military conflict in Manchuria between Soviet and Chinese troops. China is increasingly seeking its own allies in Asia and begins seeing North Vietnam as a Soviet puppet. This is why the Chinese do not support the Vietnamese in the Vietnam War, because they see Vietnam not anymore in the image of anti-imperialist struggle, but now as part of their own great power struggle with Russia. The names might be Soviet Union, but now it's not anymore about that. Now it's Russia versus China. Okay? And they develop their nuclear weapons. What does Nixon and Kissinger do in the face of the situation? In Vietnam, initially they escalate the conflict, which leads directly to the Cambodian genocide, the Khmer Rouge conflict, okay? Then, when that fails, when they fail to win by escalation, they give up. Nixon has a new strategy called localization. Essentially, they say to the South Vietnamese army, we'll give you weapons, the best training we can, but you're on your own slowly. We'll give you air support, but you're on your own on your fight. So they support the RFA, the Republic of Vietnam Army, but they pull out American troops, okay? In Europe, downtown with the Soviets, you have your people to muck around, we have our people to muck around. His vice president, Spiro Agnew, who was half a Greek-American, terrible human being, very good relationships with the junta. By the way, the Greek junta supported the election campaign of Nixon with dark money. They literally sent money to America, okay? Globally through, this is important. Kissinger is smart. He is a very problematic person, but he's smart. And he notices that there's something going on between the Soviets and the Chinese, that the old image of a monolithic Soviet bloc, communist bloc in the world, doesn't work anymore. And he says, I'm going to finish and then we're going to finish early, okay? And he says, this is an opening, this is a chance. So he tries to lead to a new understanding with China. It only took the Americans 7 years to wake up to the fact that the Chinese and the Soviets were split. But it happened, okay? Meanwhile, they're supporting anti-communist regimes, whatever their character. Are you a fascist? We support you. Are you a liberal? We support you. Are you socialist? We support you. Are you communist fighting other communists? We support you. We don't care. Are you fighting the support of the Soviet Union and China? You're our friend. 1970s sees a number of global actions. In Libya, there is regime change with Soviet support leading to the regime of Muammar Gaddafi. That's when we get Gaddafi in the world. They also support the regime change in Ethiopia in 1974, which leads to the creation of one of the nastiest Soviet regimes in the world, the Derg, which will lead to a massive famine in Ethiopia that will kill millions. The US supports a coup in Argentina, fascists. Supports a coup in Chile, fascists. Supports regime change in Indonesia, where Suharto, who is a big Soviet Lenin is replaced by Sukarno, and supports a new coup in Greece in 1970 where the king is kicked out. Okay? Vietnam War, 70 to 75. The main problem is this. The Americans cannot destroy the Vietnamese army. They defeat it again and again. Every battle is almost an American victory. Okay? But the bloody bastards are still there. And they're not there like little gorillas without weapons. They're there with tanks and artillery and MiG fighters. They're there in conventional form. The expansion of the war to Laos and Cambodia is a complete failure that leads to communist regimes. Laos still has one of the last surviving Stalinist regimes in the world. Laos is a Stalinist regime. I'm not kidding you. It is actually, if you want to see Stalinism, you either go to Belarus or to Laos for tourism. Okay? Cambodia gets the Khmer Rouge, who are the biggest bastards in the modern history and commit genocide against their own people. 1973, the US pulls out and fully all support for the RVA in 1975. Until 1975, generally speaking, the Vietnamese Southern Army can hold its own against the North Vietnamese, but without American support, it collapses. The North Vietnamese take Saigon, rename it Ho Chi Minh City. The war in Cambodia and Laos continues, and the united Vietnam now goes back to old great power politics and repeatedly clashes with China over Chinese support for the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. So you have the communists in Vietnam fighting by proxy the communists in China who are supporting really nasty communists in Khmer Rouge. Everybody's fighting each other. Here is a characteristic underground anti-war cartoon about the Vietnam War from America. This is technically illegal for me to show you because I'm violating the IP of a certain company, but that's what they used to do back in the day. You all know this character? Yeah? Right? Mickey Mouse goes to Vietnam. You know? This was not created by Disney, I have to be very clear. Right, so he joined the army and see the world. Mickey, you know, Mickey, he likes adventures. So, well, now he joins the army, gets a weapon. Yeah, man, America, fuck yeah! Yeah, okay? So he's going on the ship to Vietnam, he's really happy, okay, he's excited. Vietnam, there's war going on here, but he's gonna see the world. He arrives, he's very happy. He's very, very happy. He's in the jungle, boom. And now he's dead. These were illegal, and you would watch them in schools, like in Berkeley, where they will be shown between, they will be created by students to other students. Okay? So there you go. Mickey dies as an imperialist pig. Why did the US lose at Vietnam? Americans are still debating this because, well, old American people just don't have anything better to do. That's very ageist. I apologize for that. Okay? Now, people on the left wing say America lost because of us. Okay? It was the anti-war movement that forced America to give up, and the guerrilla warfare in of the Vietnamese people. So for the left wing in America, it's all about guerrilla warfare. It's all about hiding in the jungle and peace protests in America. The right wing agrees with them in that, yes, it is your fault we lost the war. You lost the war, you spineless communists, okay? But also claims the South Vietnamese government's weakness was a problem. America did not impose a proper government there. And secondly, we did not want to invade North Vietnam. The United States of America never invaded North Vietnam during the war. It bombed the hell out of it, but it never crossed into it. Why? Because Korean War fear. They were scared that if they invade North Vietnam, China is going to attack back just like in the Korean War. Because they didn't know that the Chinese hate the Vietnamese. Okay? General Giap, the supreme commander of the North Vietnamese army, one of the best generals of the modern era, actually said something very simple. He once met an American colonel after the Vietnam War because slowly the Vietnamese and the Americans became friends since they all hate the Chinese. And the colonel told him angrily, "You know what? We defeated you in every battle." And General Giap answered, "That is very true. It is also irrelevant." Yeah? For Giap, the reason was very simple. The US won all the battles on a tactical level. He doesn't deny that. Yeah, you guys kicked my ass. Fair enough. But they could never exploit those tactical victories to a strategic victory. They could never destroy the enemy conventional army. The conventional Vietnamese army, not the guerrillas, survived. And its continued survival simply sapped the willingness of the US government to win. Simple as that. Giap would say, well, the Americans won the battles, and it was irrelevant. These guys had nothing to do with it. These guys had nothing to do with it. The American army did a great job. You kicked my ass. But it was irrelevant. You see how in the modern era, winning the battle is meaningless if you cannot exploit it strategically. Okay? Meanwhile, in 1971, you have the Third Indo-Pakistani War over and the creation of Bangladesh. Bangladesh used to be part of Pakistan, but it used to be heavily discriminated by Pakistanis in the rule. This led to a Bangladeshi national movement which was brutally suppressed by the Pakistanis, which leads to a war as India steps in. For the first time, America and China openly support Pakistan, while the Soviets are supporting the Indians who are trying to stop essentially mass murder. India wins a decisive victory which leads to the independence of Bangladesh, but the consequences are massive. First of all, the Pakistanis decide to find nuclear weapons. They have lost 3 conventional wars with India. They come to the conclusion they can't defeat India on a conventional level. So they need nuclear weapons. Secondly, the defeat leads to a political crisis that paves the way for the military regime of Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq. And Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq is a fanatical Islamist. Until now, the Pakistani government is kind of like a weaker version of Kemalism in Turkey. It tries to be secular, okay? They really do admire Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. They try to do Atatürk reforms, they largely failed. Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq is like, screw that shit. We're going to become an Islamist country. With lots of Saudi money, he starts doing away with the secular reforms and strengthening the role of hardcore Wahhabi Islam. India itself starts seeing itself as the, well, you know, we are kind of like the most strong power in the region. We are the regional hegemon. Intervening in places like Sri Lanka. Once they learn that the Pakistanis are trying to get nuclear weapons, they also get nuclear weapons. Okay. Now, I missed something here. I don't know why. Okay. In the meantime, in 1973, the Yom Kippur War happens. What's going on here is Nasser dies and he's replaced by Anwar Sadat. Anwar Sadat decides that, you know what? Working so closely with the Soviets hasn't really worked well for Egypt. Maybe we have to become a bit more independent. Maybe we need to get a bit more American support. But he can't openly go one day and say to all the Egyptians, America is our friend now. Instead, what he does is he decides to cause a war with Israel. Now, he knows he's going to lose the war. But he doesn't care because Sadat understands the rule of the Cold War, which is, it's not important if you win or you lose the battle. What's important is, can you win the peace? By causing a war with Israel, he will create a great power crisis. This will bring the great powers in to try to impose peace. That will open up the space for him to jump ship to the American side. The Egyptians and the Syrians prepare very well for the war. Unlike the previous Arab-Israeli war, this is mainly a Syrian-Egyptian story, okay? And they do very well initially. They completely surprise the Israelis. They kick their ass. But But the Israelis are Israelis. They do have the best army in the region, and they're able to counterattack together with American support. And Ariel Sharon, to be specifically, heads an encirclement of the Third Egyptian Army. The war ends when the Soviets threaten nuclear war on Israel. But for Sadat, that's perfect. This isn't just a crisis, it's a fucking nuclear crisis. This is great. Because the Americans go in and they work with him. He takes advantage of the American mediation to sign the peace treaty with Israel. He expels all of the Soviet advisors, essentially taking Egypt out of the Soviet side and putting it on the American side. And importantly, with this peace treaty, the interstate phase of the Arab-Israeli conflict is over. Because without Egypt, no Arab country can fight Israel. The rest of them are all crappy armies. Egypt is the sword of the Arab world. It has the population, it has the military traditions, it has the money to build massive armored armies that can take on the Israelis. But when Egypt makes peace, who's gonna fight? Syria? Sure, Saddam Hussein goes like, I can take on it. Not really though. He's too far away. No other Arab state could face Israel with a chance of winning a conventional war. Only Syria is still willing to fight Israeli conventional war, but it's too weak. The PLO has already been expelled from the Middle East by Jordan in 1970-1971. So, this is why the Morsi change in Egypt was so important for the Israelis and such a big threat. Israeli conventional security is based on having excellent relations with Egypt. Any regime that is even a bit likely to go back to the old days of anti-Israeli politics in Egypt is a fundamentally deadly threat for Israel. They will never ever let democracy in Egypt if democracy in Egypt means war with Israel. And as long as Egypt and Israel are allies, there is no Arab state in the world that can take on the Israelis. Nobody. The Syrians humiliated them in a way in Lebanon, but mostly the most successful organization are guerrilla warfare by Hezbollah. And that's why Iran has become the powerful actor in this conflict, because Iran is far enough that it doesn't care about conventional warfare with Israel. Another impact of this is the 1973 oil crisis, okay? What happens is Saudi Arabia, until now a loyal ally of the United States of America, but somebody who has to participate in all the Arab-Israeli wars out of solidarity for the Arabs, and a very big supporter of the Islamicification of Pakistan, okay, decides, together with the Arab oil-producing states, to punish the West during the Arab-Israeli war by doing an oil embargo, okay? Now, it works badly for everybody. The crisis had really less to do with Arab-Israeli relations and more to do with economics. The 1971 decision of the US to end the gold standard, which destroyed the Bretton Woods system and create a massive economic crisis, okay? It affected directly the US and Europe. It didn't really affect a lot the USSR because the Soviet Union itself was a major oil producer. And there were three consequences. First of all, it led to the fall of the Nixon administration and to appear the very powerful congressional government in the United States. Under the Ford administration, the president became a nobody. Congress became extremely powerful, and it will take Reagan to go back to the era of a powerful presidency. Secondly, in the UK, the economic crisis destroyed the old liberal welfare state, leading to the rise of Margaret Thatcher, neoliberal economics, as they are called by some people, and essentially the crisis of the Western European welfare state model. Okay? Thirdly, it contributed to the stagnation of the Soviet economy after 1975. It will have long-term effects, very serious. It made Saudi Arabia very powerful. And the money Saudi Arabia made out of this crisis is the money it used to promote, and it uses to promote Wahhabism across the Islamic world. But finally, it screwed the Arabs. Because after this oil crisis, the other oil-producing countries of the world decided to never permit the Arabs to ever have that kind of power. And they essentially worked to break the power of OPEC. And it was largely successful. Okay, let's stop here. There's still a lot to